In his final moments alive, Richard McCroskey left behind a haunting message. To anyone who found it, he wanted his parents to know he loved them deeply. Yet, he expressed sorrow for what he had done to his brother and sister. He singled out Eric and Emily, his siblings, professing love and apologizing for the path he had taken. Though he claimed he would take responsibility himself, he hinted that the truth was more complicated than it first appeared. In a breathless confession, Richard McCroskey admitted he was overwhelmed by what he had done. Uncertain of what to say, he apologized and accepted that he must face the consequences of his actions. He wished he had not reached this point. He confessed to losing control, snapping under pressure, and doing what he now had to pay for. Shaking, he repeated his love for his parents and sorrow for his deeds, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Addressing those who would despise him, he offered a cold apology and insisted he had no choice but to act as he did. His mind shattered beyond repair, Richard declared he could no longer endure the world around him. This was the man behind the horror, and what had just been witnessed was his chilling confession. Captured mere moments after he had brutally murdered 4 innocent victims, Richard spoke of a stench he could no longer bear, the putrid smell of decomposing bodies he left behind, which neighbors soon noticed, mistaking it for a dead animal. They were unaware of the far more horrifying truth concealed inside. Within that home, Richard McCroskey had lived for days amidst the decomposing corpses of his victims. When he finally fled, he left behind a scene soaked in blood and terror. The grisly tableau that awaited police officers defied their darkest nightmares. Born on December 26, 1988, in California, Richard's troubled youth was marked by bullying and fractured family ties. His fascination with dark music evolved into an obsession with horrorcore, a genre steeped in violent and macabre themes. Richard immersed himself in psychological horror, gangster tales, urban violence, and true crime. His parents' separation in 2009 and his mother's departure deepened the wounds of his already turbulent teenage years. After attending 2 high schools, he dropped out, targeted relentlessly for his weight, red hair, and outsider status. By 2008, he worked part-time as a graphic designer while exploring horrorcore rap. On MySpace, under the alias Secco Sam, he shared disturbing lyrics boasting of murder, describing killing slowly as the ultimate thrill. He wrote of stabbing victims repeatedly until nothing remained. Soon, Richard McCroskey transformed these dark fantasies into reality, committing murders that mirrored his brutal words. His hobbies and interests were deeply unsettling. As Little Demon Dog and Psycho Sam, he posted explicit underground horror content and detailed discussions of killing. His room was adorned with gore-filled posters and horrorcore art, reflecting his fixation on David Richard Berkowitz, the son of Sam, a notorious serial killer who claimed demonic control. Richard spent countless hours isolated in his room, absorbed in violent video games, with heavy metal and horrorcore music blasting. His sinister lyrics echoed the darkness festering within. His words urged him toward a brutal spree, and he openly boasted of grave vandalism in YouTube videos, describing defiling graves and interpreting lightning strikes as ominous warnings. He recorded himself amid rainstorms, distancing himself from blame, while often posing with axes near his face in cemetery photos. In the horrorcore online community, Richard found a platform to validate his inner demons. There, he encountered 16-year-old Emma Neterbrock, who shared his disturbing musical tastes. Emma, known as Ragdoll in this dark subculture, grew close to Richard. Their bond deepened through exchanged video messages, fueling each other's morbid fantasies. Richard's initial messages revealed a nervous, self-conscious young man, reluctant to reveal his messy room but eager to please Emma. True to his word, he cleaned his room and sent another video, addressing Emma warmly as Ragdoll, though still unsure how to engage her through the screen. In this second message, he offered a glimpse of his personal space, proudly displaying his door, an addiction to energy drinks, and a modest collection of underground CDs. He called his wall of posters and flyers a wall of awesomeness, featuring a hatchet and various items that hinted at his dark interests. Suddenly, the battery began to die, cutting off the message abruptly. What began as a harmless virtual friendship was on the verge of spiraling into something far more sinister. Emma Neterbrock was born on October 15, 1992, and lived with her parents, Mark Neterbrock and Deborah Kelly, in Farmville, Virginia. Her father served as a pastor at Walker's Presbyterian Church. Her mother was a criminal justice professor. Homeschooled since middle school, Emma lived with her mother after her parents divorced in early 2009. Like Richard, she experienced a rebellious teenage phase but was remembered as a sweet, well-mannered girl. Behind her innocent exterior, Emma's descent into the dark world she shared with Richard would soon lead both down a path of unspeakable horror. Emma had transformed completely, adopting a new persona marked by pink hair and gothic attire. Her fascination with the violent and explicit world of horrorcore signaled a shift that her parents naively dismissed as a passing phase. But the dark makeup and satanic imagery were no fleeting trend. Emma had plunged deep into occult and sinister themes, unsettling those around her. By September 2009, Richard McCroskey had begun to mistake their daily online chats for something far more intimate. He convinced himself that Emma was his girlfriend, even before they had met face to face. Though she sent flirty messages, no one truly understood the depth of her feelings, especially considering what was doomed to unfold. Emma's closest confidant, Melanie Wells, an 18-year-old from West Virginia, shared Emma's obsession with horrorcore. Both were rebellious souls who found solace in their dark passions, photography, and elaborate gothic styling. Melanie, known online as Mrs. Free Abortions, often posted eerie photos from cemeteries. She openly embraced a fascination with bloodlust, alcohol, and open graves. Together they attended several horrorcore festivals, thrilled by the macabre and satanic atmosphere. When Strictly for the Wicked, an all-day horrorcore festival, was announced for September 12, 2009, the girls eagerly made plans to attend. But this time, Richard McCroskey was set to join them. After months of online interaction, the festival would mark their first in-person meeting. Emma's parents, understandably anxious, worried about their daughter meeting a stranger. Despite their concerns and the strain of a recent divorce, Mark and Deborah consented to drive Emma, Melanie, and Richard to Southgate, Michigan for the festival. They planned to explore the city while the trio attended the event. At the time, Mark and Deborah had no inkling that Richard's obsession with Emma would spiral into something dangerous. On September 6th, Richard left California, heading east to Virginia for the long-anticipated meeting. Emma could barely contain her excitement. On September 7th, she posted a heartfelt message on Richard's MySpace, promising he would soon be at her house, declaring love that felt eternal. Richard's arrival at her Farmville home was the only way her parents would allow her to attend the festival. Though the exact day of Richard's arrival is uncertain, it was clear he stayed several days before the concert. The festival was scheduled to open its doors at 1 p.m. on September 12th. Allowing a stranger to live in their home was a risky decision by Emma's parents. With Melanie joining them, the trio prepared for the long 10-hour drive to the festival. But what awaited was far from the dream Emma had envisioned. When Emma finally saw Richard in person, the illusion built from MySpace photos shattered. He appeared shorter, younger, and far less appealing, with greasy red hair and baggy clothes that did nothing to help his image. Emma's initial attraction evaporated instantly. Both girls soon grew annoyed and distant, their disinterest in Richard becoming palpable. Richard, oblivious to the shift, clung to the hope that the festival's dark vibe would rekindle their online bond. But those hopes were swiftly dashed. Emma barely acknowledged Richard at the festival, instead gravitating toward friends and the music. His frustration deepened as jealousy consumed him, especially as he observed Emma flirting with others. The festival ended late on September 12th, and the group embarked on the 600-mile journey back to Farmville. No one in the car could have guessed that this trip would ignite a nightmare they could never escape. The disappearance of Melanie Wells, shortly after the concert, marked the beginning of a grim saga. Her last known online activity was a MySpace post at 2:43 a.m. on September 14th, reflecting on the festival and expressing longing for home. Her sudden silence afterward alarmed her family and friends, who repeatedly tried to reach her with no success. On September 16th, the day Melanie was expected home, her father, Thomas Wells, arrived at Emma's house but was met with silence. He waited over 7 hours in his car, growing more unsettled before leaving with a heavy sense that something was terribly wrong. Melanie's mother, Kathleen, spiraled into panic, calling everyone who might have seen her daughter, only to be met with silence. Desperate, Kathleen reached out to Andreas Schrimm, also known as Sicktastic, the organizer of the festival. Within the tight-knit horrorcore community, Andreas confirmed seeing Melanie, Emma, and Richard at the event, and that they left accompanied by Emma's parents. Kathleen's dread deepened. She called Emma's house again, and this time Richard answered the phone. His evasive and vague responses about Melanie's whereabouts only fueled her suspicions. In her gut, Kathleen knew Richard was concealing the truth. Her worries culminated on the morning of September 17th, when she contacted Farmville police to request a welfare check at Emma's residence. Richard met the officers at the door, claiming Emma and Melanie were out at the movies with Emma's mother. His confident demeanor as he posed as Emma's boyfriend convinced the police there was no immediate cause for concern. In the wake of growing anxiety, Melanie's mother reached out to Andreas Schrimm, known in the horrorcore scene as Sicktastic, the festival organizer who confirmed seeing Melanie, Emma, and Richard leave with Emma's parents. Her subsequent calls to Emma's home were answered evasively by Richard, deepening her suspicions. She was certain Richard was concealing the truth. By the morning of September 17th, Kathleen's concern reached a critical point. With no sign of Melanie, she contacted the Farmville police, urging them to conduct a welfare check at Emma's residence. When officers arrived, Richard met them at the door. He told the police that Emma and Melanie were out at the movies with Emma's mother. Richard, to be seen as Emma's boyfriend, carried himself with such confidence that the officers found no immediate cause for alarm. Accepting his word, the police did not press to search the house, despite the urgency of the missing persons report. Later, Kathleen reached out to Emma's father, Mark, who promised to check on Melanie and follow up. Unbeknownst to Kathleen, 5 p.m. on September 17th would mark the last time she heard from Mark. His silence afterward was profound. No calls came through to ease her growing fears. As dread consumed her, Kathleen realized something was gravely wrong. On the morning of September 18th, she called the police again, her voice heavy with desperation. This time she persuaded the officers to return to Emma and Deborah's home. Her words echoed the helpless uncertainty gripping her. She did not know who to turn to, or what fate awaited her daughter. For 2.5 days, the family from Farmville, Virginia, had vanished without a trace. Kathleen revealed her growing alarm. She could not reach her daughter. Her cell phone was switched off. Even more troubling, the girl her daughter was staying with was also missing, her phone silent. The daughter's boyfriend remained at the house, but his stories conflicted during several calls. Kathleen's husband had gone to the house the previous day to pick up their daughter. He arrived around 11 a.m. and waited outside for 8 hours. No one appeared. No doors were answered. Despite being 4 hours away, the family was running out of options. At 3:20 p.m., the police returned to the house. The front door stood unlocked, yet Richard McCroskey, who had been there the day before, was nowhere to be found. The officers were immediately struck by a sickening stench of decay flooding from the main entrance, a smell they strangely missed on their earlier visit. Inside, they faced a horrifying tableau in what appeared to be Emma's downstairs bedroom. 3 lifeless bodies lay in a pool of blood, their state of decomposition confirming the grim reality. This grim discovery secured a search warrant as the investigation intensified. Upstairs, police uncovered another victim, Emma's mother, Deborah Kelly. The 3 bodies downstairs were later identified as Mark Neterbrock, Emma Neterbrock, and Melanie Wells. The brutality etched into the crime scene haunted the investigators. Without divulging details, they confirmed all had died from severe blunt force trauma. The grim task of piecing together evidence had just begun. Social media accounts of Emma and Melanie were scrutinized to untangle the web. A 5th individual, who attended the festival with the victims and returned with them to Farmville, was also missing. An officer recalled an earlier encounter with Richard during a welfare check. The chilling realization sunk in. A manhunt for Richard McCroskey was underway. The police remembered a strange interaction with him just 12 hours before the bodies were found. At around 4 a.m. on September 18th, Richard was ticketed for driving without a license after his car was stuck in a ditch. When questioned about the vehicle, he casually claimed it belonged to his girlfriend's father. At that moment, no one could fathom that this 20-year-old had just murdered 4 people with a hammer and a mallet. A tow truck driver who gave him a ride noted Richard's foul odor. The motive behind the savage killings was Richard's bitter rage over Emma rejecting his love. The other 3 victims were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, their judgment clouded by alcohol and marijuana. Armed with a ball-peen hammer, Richard first attacked Melanie, who slept on the couch. Then, he went upstairs to kill Emma's mother before ending Emma's life in her downstairs bedroom. All 3 women were slain in their sleep on September 15th. On September 17th, when Emma's father, Mark Neterbrock, visited his ex-wife's house to check on Melanie, Richard struck again, beating him to death with a wood-splitting mallet. Richard spent days living amidst the bodies. He then dragged Mark's and Melanie's corpses into Emma's bedroom. It was during this dark period that he recorded a chilling video, contemplating suicide before stealing Mark's car to flee towards California. In the recording, Richard hinted at his grim intentions without explicit confession, leaving a haunting silence that spoke volumes. Richard McCroskey was apprehended on September 19th at the baggage claim area of Richmond International Airport. He faced charges including robbery, grand theft, and 6 counts of first-degree murder. Ultimately, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Police found Richard Alden Samcroskey III asleep in the airport, bringing a grim end to a horrifying chapter.